Hey, now is the right time to discuss Season 4 Part 2. In the event that you haven't watched Season 4 Part 1, check the description box below for our other video. In Part 1 everything was answered in 5 episodes. We were simply given the identity of the Eat the Rich killer, the consolidation of Love and Beck from the trailer, and the answer on if something happened to Marianne. This second part was precisely exact thing the 4th season needed. After a somewhat tanned portion we saw the evil Joe that we love to hate, and it was good. So with that let's recap, break down and explain all that there was for takeaway from this most recent installment. So let's get into it. Here is you Season 4 Part 2 ending explaining. Just to tell you, this video will contain spoilers. As was anticipated in our past video that I did towards the end of Season 4 Part 1, we saw that Reese was as a matter of fact real, yet the version Joe was addressing was something that Joe had made within his brain, and due to becoming fixated on the book that Reese composed, the malicious side of his psyche was something that took form of Reese Montrose. He did this as an approach to having the option to legitimize the killings and taking Marianne, showing that the discussions that he had never really occurred. This was uncovered to us when we saw that Joe approached Reese's actual location and confronted him. Reese remained unaware of Joe and acted like he'd never met him, since he never had. This implied that Joe was as a matter of fact Eat the Rich killer, and he was doing it in a blacked out state. Joe killed Malcolm first because he talked wrongly of Marianne. He killed Simon since he was stealing the work by less lucky individuals and assuming praise for it. And he killed Gemma since she was catching on to the way that people began dying from the second that he turned up. These would all be done in a blacked out state, and afterward, when he would come to, the killing would be finished and he would be in a same place where he passed out. This appeared to be legit with regards to why the proof continued to spring up. The instant messages were vanishing and it was easy for Reese to get to his loft as the need arose. It was with the revelation of Reese that we got perhaps of the greatest revelation in the series, and that was that Marianne never returned to Paris. However, we'll address that in a second. Reese basically turned into the dark side of Joe's mind until the season, and we saw that it was the voice within his head telling him on to do the entirety of the terrible things. For instance, he wanted to kill Marianne, kill Tom Lockwood, and numerous different things. There was a moment in the finale where we saw that Joe stands up to Reese, otherwise known as the dark side of his psyche, on the bridge before he jumped. Joe comprehended that his dark past within him just at any point wanted the best for Joe, and that he did it since he was paying special attention to himself, showing us that in the last minutes he was all the while legitimizing why he did those horrible things. His support was on the grounds that he believed Joe should feel the adoration that he merited. Right toward the end of the season, long after the dark side of Joe's mind was gone for good, we saw that Joe looked beyond the window within the reflection. There was Reese Montrose grinning back at him, showing that the dark side is back and present inside Joe's psyche. He doesn't have to hide it now since he has the assets in Kate to conceal anything, assuming that it should be finished. So Joe is basically ready to act how he wants and can pull off anything because of the power that Kate name has. Then, there was an extraordinary second in episode 9 of the show, where we saw that Joe began hallucinating after awakening, and we got a trip through a world of fond memories of all the ladies that Joe had killed as he was looking for a way to get Marianne out of the vault. I realized this scene was going been a good one when it began with the melody Love by Sinatra. It made me think Pedretti character was just couple of seconds away, and it most certainly was. The scene began with love and it finished with it. After seeing Gemma, we saw Guinevere Beck return and stood up to Joe in a hallucinated state, where she referenced to Joe how she did nothing out of sorts, but he killed her in any case. This was at the time where Joe was attempting to legitimize his activities within his own brain from everything that he'd at any point done before. Furthermore, he was gradually finding some peace with the way that he was a malevolent individual. Then, it finished with Love, who was a hallucination. She was the fundamental individual who caused Joe to understand that his form of adoration is loving someone to the place where no other person can have them, and he eventually winds up killing them, demonstrating that the main way for the cycle to be broken was for him to dispose of himself. Consequently, why we saw the scene in the finale. The arrival of the characters were great, and they enhanced the creating plot. They permitted Joe to recognize the truth about himself and acknowledged how he believed he expected to manage what is happening. Did Marianne survive? Interestingly, one of Joe's characters really got a happy ending, and that was Marianne. Returning on the train once again to Paris. His alter ego self had begun taking over at that point, and we saw that he poisoned her espresso. Took her and afterward put her in his infamous plexiglass vault that he had constructed. When the scene of Kate and Joe happened where they were strolling past the Indian restaurant, I realized that it would have been where his vault was. I thought we got some of Penn Badgley's best acting chops when he was interacting with Marianne. We saw exactly the amount of an unhinged fixation crazy person that he was, at the point of which he didn't actually perceive himself any longer. He didn't have any idea who Joe Goldberg endlessly was, exclusively living as Professor Jonathan Moore. Accepting that he was conversing with Reese, it was once he begun returning to reality that he was sorting out where Marianne was and that he expected to get her out. Notwithstanding, what he didn't know was that Nadia was on his case and realized that Marianne was inside the vault because of her tracking down the key in his condo. I viewed Nadia's contribution as excessive, and I didn't actually feel like her personality emitted those energies in the first part, leading it to feel a cycle unexpected when she was breaking into Joe's loft straight away. Yet I can look past that since it accomplished the end goal. When Joe saw Sims, he went to the vault. However, by then Marianne was dead, and we were persuaded to think that she was. Nevertheless, in actual fact, there was a more deeper twist that was uncovered right toward the end. Nadia and Marianne came up with a plan. There were these things that Marianne can take which would dial her heart back, which would make Joe feel that she was dead. Yet, in reality, she was simply heavily sedated. Nadia eventually followed Joe to where he left her, and she gave her a shot to awaken her. This implied that Marianne was basically free, and Joe accepted that she gone, implying that he would presently not pursue her. Since, supposing that he accepted that she was dead, then, at that point, pretty much nothing remains to be fixated on. This then permitted her to return to Paris and get a fairly cheerful happy ending, being brought together with her little girl. This may imply that to expect the return for Marianne could be on the card in the last season, where Joe gets brought down. Who was the photographer woman? All things considered, this was the sort of thing that didn't really contribute that much to the general plot. However, it implied that doubts were named toward Joe for a little time frame, and it implied that Nadia was very interested in Joe. The photographer was a stalker, not part of the press. She was very fixated on Phoebe and accepted that they were best friends. She took Phoebe to a hotel room and kept her there, which cautioned the police, and afterward, once Joe got into the room, he put Simon's ear inside her bag, which meant she was framed for being the eat the rich killer, permitting the strain to be off Joe. So what has been going on with everyone toward the end? Right toward the end, we saw that after Joe killed Kate's controlling dad, he jumped off of the bridge, and we were persuaded to think that he was gone. We saw that he awakened in a hospital and Kate was there. This was a genuine defining moment for the characters. Joe had really focused profoundly on Kate all through the final season 4, and she was what he was thinking about when he was sinking further and more deeper. After awakening, we saw that he really informed Kate everything concerning his past, and she vowed to remain by him since she loved him. He uncovered his real name to her, which was a strong moment. All Joe had at any point wanted was to be seen, heard, and loved, and Kate is someone who really gives that to him. The arrangement is for the two of them to keep each other good, so I envision we'll find out how that is going to turn out to go. Being with Kate, who's basically enabling him to have the option to do as he wants. He's basically turning out to be incredibly well known for being the individual that has got another opportunity at life subsequent to escaping his killer wife. He got his bookstore, which we hope it's the one as the first season. However, I definitely expect it is, since they're back in New York. Nadia needed to ensure that Joe couldn't treat it any other person once more, yet eventually she met her destruction and was put in jail for killing that she didn't commit. Joe being associated with Kate implies that he can basically conceal what he wants, and this the first we saw that he flexed the power that he had. As far as the remainder of the cast, Phoebe wound up working in a school in Thailand. Rolled, Sophie and Blessing carried on as they were. Connie was clean, and Adam was killed by Kate's dad. Overall review, I thought this second part of season 4 was splendid. I was heavily invested into the twists that were happening, and I found myself cheering when things happen. For example, when it was revealed that the version of Reese that Joe knew was within his mind, when Love and Beck returned, and also when Marianne was revealed to be in the plexiglass vault. This season 4 took us on a twister of emotions, and with it starting as a murder mystery and finishing with Joe taking a deeper look inwards and being prepared to put an end to the cycle. It showed just how much of a deterioration of Joe's mental mind took. I feel he did see the light and wanted to be good when he woke up after being saved, but I think with Reese being reflected in the window it's shown that he's not going to have changed at all. The beard is gonna, which means that Joe Goldberg is well and truly back. So there you have it. Season 4 Part 2, Recap and Ending Explained. If you want to see more videos such as Recap, Ending Explained, theories and predictions and character breakdowns, then click on the subscribe button. If you'd like to see a show or movie that you'd like for me to review or recap, then comment below. Thank you.